Hello, boring people. Tonight we drift along the lazy tide of time and find ourselves on a blustery Aegean beach. The waves are gray and slow, like sleepy thoughts rolling in and out of your mind. Salt clings to your skin, the air is thick with sea mist, and a bored seagull is yelling at a rock. You probably won't be able to stay awake through this story, and that's exactly the point. So before you jump into this boring and sleepy mythology, please take a moment to like my videos and subscribe to my channel. But only if you actually enjoy and feel comfortable with the stories I tell here. And hey, if you're still awake, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where my fellow sleepy myth lovers are listening from. Now lie down and relax, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's start our boring journey together tonight. You're walking barefoot along a narrow strip of sand that never seems to end. It squishes under your toes in that oddly satisfying way, but the clouds overhead are heavy and sulky, like someone's about to throw a divine tantrum. And that someone is Poseidon. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, horses, and inexplicable mood swings, is not having a good week. His hair is tangled with kelp, his beard smells faintly of brine, and nobody seems to be taking him seriously. Not even the mortals building yet another temple to that show-off Apollo. He paces up and down the sea floor like a grumpy landlord. Jellyfish scoot out of his way. Fish pretend to be busy. He kicks a coral reef, which hurts more than he admits. He's mad at mortals, at his siblings, at a boat that didn't capsize the way he wanted it to. You, meanwhile, are floating through this scene like a sleepy jelly bean with ears. The thing is, Poseidon wasn't always so testy. But ever since the whole division of the cosmos thing with Zeus and Hades, he's felt underappreciated. Zeus got the skies, lightning, thunder, big entrances, all that glamorous stuff. Hades got the underworld, which, while a bit gloomy, at least had its own aesthetic. Poseidon, wetness, that's what he got. There's a moment, long ago, where all three brothers drew lots to divide the world. Some scholars say it was fair. Others say Zeus rigged it with weighted stones. Historians still argue whether the drawing was truly random, or if Zeus palmed the best lot while Poseidon was distracted by a mussel. Either way, Poseidon got the sea. And the sea is vast, salty, full of things that sting or squirt ink. Poseidon thought he'd be okay with it. At first, he tried to embrace the role. He decorated with barnacle thrones and dolphin butlers, commissioned seashell music, and even tried riding chariots drawn by golden seahorses. But it never quite hit the same level of thunderclap glory that Zeus enjoyed. And of course, there's the matter of mortals. Those tiny land-crawling creatures who prayed for sunshine and rain, but never really thanked the ocean unless they were shipwrecked. Poseidon watched them from afar, building their silly boats, tossing their leftover fish bones into his water like he was a hungry stray god. There was one particular city, a little collection of huts and aspirations, right along the coast that really irritated him. They hadn't built a single altar to him, not even a shell-shaped bench. Just olive trees and little stone owls. You squint. The place is called Athens, but we're not there yet. First, we're stuck in this salty moment, where Poseidon is testing out how high he can make a tidal wave go before Zeus complains. Spoiler, not very high. Apparently, flash flooding a temple to Hera is problematic. He decides to retreat, grudgingly, back into his palace beneath the waves. The walls are made of pearls and sea glass, which is beautiful until you realize everything's wet, and it smells faintly of old squid. Amphitrite, his queen, is busy organizing some crustacean parade and barely glances at him. Even Triton, their trumpet-blowing son, is too busy trying to invent underwater rap battles. Poseidon sighs, and this is when he starts thinking, maybe brooding is the better word. He broods like a man who's been told one too many times that the sea isn't important unless it's for trade. He broods so hard that the temperature of the Mediterranean drops a few degrees. To prove his worth, he needs something bold, dramatic, something that makes mortals gasp and whisper, "Wow, the sea god is not to be trifled with." You know, something with horsepower. But we're getting ahead of ourselves again. You trudge forward through wet dreams and mythic memories as Poseidon starts compiling his list of divine grievances. Zeus gets statues with six-pack abs. Poseidon gets marble blobs vaguely shaped like a fish. He scratches a trident-shaped doodle into the sea floor. The doodle grows into a whirlpool. The whirlpool eats a passing tuna. Poseidon doesn't even blink. This is the energy you're floating in now, a slow spiral of ancient grudges, wet ambition, and oceanic overthinking. You feel the gentle tug of currents wrapping around your legs like sleepy cats. You hear the muffled argument of dolphins in the distance. And above it all, the quiet resentment of a god who just wants to be taken seriously for once. You may not care, but Poseidon does. You're still drifting, half submerged in Poseidon's sea of grievances, when your head bobs up into the clouds. Not actual clouds, but the high halls of Olympus, where family dysfunction comes in thunderous volumes and passive-aggressive stares. You find yourself perched somewhere between two glittering marble columns, watching a divine board meeting unfold like a very awkward Thanksgiving dinner. Zeus sits at the head of the celestial table, shirt open, chest glowing, beard fully fluffed. He's clearly enjoying himself. With a dramatic flourish, he unrolls a shimmering scroll and proclaims the division of cosmic domains. This one gets the sky, this one gets the sea, this one gets the gloom. You glance across the table at Poseidon, who's slouched in his golden seashell chair with all the enthusiasm of a wet sponge. The divine domain draft had started out with so much promise. After all, they were brothers. Surely they'd share power like reasonable immortals, right? Not so much. Zeus grabs the sky for himself with a smug twinkle in his eye. Lightning, storms, rainbows. He even takes credit for clouds. Hades, quiet as usual, nods once and accepts the underworld like a goth kid politely choosing the basement. That leaves Poseidon with the sea. Historians still argue whether Poseidon truly lost the draw or simply got outmaneuvered. Some say he hesitated too long and Zeus jumped in. Others claim Poseidon was late because he was fixing a leak in the Mariana Trench. Either way, by the time he showed up, all that was left was an ocean's worth of responsibility and exactly 0 thunderbolts. The moment is uncomfortable. Hera is already complaining about how no one asked her opinion. Demeter is arguing with Artemis about seasonal harvest rites. Dionysus is asleep in a wine jug. And Hermes is live-tweeting it all to mortals via dreams. You just sit there, unnoticed, soaking in the ambient divine tension like a pillow-absorbing drool. Poseidon, to his credit, tries to make the best of it. He slaps on a forced smile, raises his trident, and says something vague about ruling the surging depths with power and grace. But inside, he's screaming. And so, back he goes to his kingdom, home of whales, sea foam, and the occasional sunken ship. No thrones in the sky. No judgment seats with lightning upholstery, just tide pools, and the lingering knowledge that he is, for better or worse, the middle brother. You trail him as he swims sulkily past underwater gardens and resentful shipwrecks. Each stroke of his hand leaves glowing bubbles that rise and fade without a sound. He's muttering to himself. Something about respect, something about never getting a proper temple launch party. Eventually, he plops himself onto a coral-studded throne and grumbles. The sea around him grumbles too, out of politeness. That's the thing with Poseidon. His moods affect more than just his immediate bubble. When he pouts, coastal towns get foggy. When he broods, fishermen lose their bait. As days pass, and by days, we mean slow, liquid centuries, Poseidon starts experimenting with how to spice up his rather soggy portfolio. First, he tries storm sculpting, giant wave art. Nobody cares. Then he dabbles in creating new sea creatures. Most of them are horrifying. One of them looks like a shrimp married a centipede. No one's impressed. He sends messages in bottles to distant oracles. The oracles write back, "Please stop." It's around this time you notice the ocean starting to stretch, like it's trying to become more than it is. Islands pop up overnight. Coral reefs arrange themselves into suspiciously symmetrical patterns. Some scholars argue that this was the start of Poseidon's long campaign to make his domain more impressive, more architectural, more worthy. Still, it's not enough, because up on land, mortals are carving statues of Zeus every 10 minutes. Meanwhile, Poseidon's likeness is a blurry mosaic in a public bathhouse. And oh, the meetings. Back on Olympus, there's always some divine conference. You float quietly in the background as Poseidon tries to propose new policies, tsunami etiquette, fishing rights, seahorse racing as an Olympic sport. But Zeus just rolls his eyes. Athena smirks. Apollo adjusts his laurel wreath without comment. And Poseidon? Well, Poseidon slams his trident down on the floor, which causes minor flooding in Cyprus, but otherwise gets ignored. You drift a little closer and catch the sparkle of salt on his eyebrows. He's seething again, the kind of slow burn that turns into something dramatic, eventually. Now he begins to plan. Nothing major, nothing flashy, just a little something to remind people he exists. First, he floods a harbor that forgot to sacrifice a goat. Then he rearranges a river out of spite. And finally, one foggy morning, Poseidon sees a group of mortals naming a brand new city. They're building it on a high rocky hill, far from his shores. They're planting olive trees. They're singing songs to Athena. He squints. He grimaces. He whispers, "Oh, you will remember me." And just like that, Poseidon rises from his throne, calls up a few thousand gallons of salt water, and heads for the mortal realm with a plan so petty it might just work. You follow behind, your thoughts heavy like soaked socks, as the tension ripples out from one god's bruised ego and toward the dry, ungrateful hills of a little upstart town that's about to become very damp. You stand now on the edge of a forgotten coastline, watching Poseidon emerge from the sea like a disgruntled dad storming into a PDA meeting. Water clings to his every movement. His hair coils with kelp, his sandals squish, and his trident is leaving tiny, irritated scorch marks in the sand. The mortals barely look up. They're too busy stacking rocks, planting things, and naming their little city after someone else. Not him. Not the sea god who's kept their boats afloat and their bellies full of mackerel. No, they're naming it after Athena. Athena, the one with the spear and the smug bird. Poseidon glares at the city in progress. Athens, they'll call it. Not Poseidopolis. Not even Tridentville. No, it's Athena's town. Because apparently wisdom and olives are so much more useful than waves and whirlpools. You sigh through your nose as Poseidon mutters something unrepeatable and gets to work. First things first, he needs a demonstration. Something flashy. Something symbolic. Something with just enough artistic flair to look like he definitely didn't care too much, even though he absolutely did. So, in front of all the elders and curious farmers and a goat that wandered in from the side, Poseidon strides to the rocky center of the town and jams his trident deep into the earth. There's a pause, a rumble, and then whoosh, a saltwater spring bursts forth from the ground. It hisses, it bubbles, it sparkles. The crowd gasps. Some applaud. One child yells, "EW." The spring sprays everyone in a 15-foot radius, soaking ropes, extinguishing torches, and ruining a batch of figs that were drying nearby. This, Poseidon declares, is his gift. A salt spring straight from the bowels of the earth to remind the city of his power. They could bathe in it. They could water their crops with it. Spoiler, they shouldn't. They could taste it once and deeply regret it. A magical, majestic symbol of the ocean, smack in the middle of a soon-to-be city. He waits for applause. Instead, they all sort of look at each other. Awkwardly, enter Athena. Now, she doesn't storm in. She glides, which is arguably more annoying. Her armor doesn't clang. Her owl doesn't even hoot. She stands beside Poseidon, surveys the same rocky spot, and without a word, bends down and places a tiny seed into the earth. A breeze passes, a rustle, and then a sprout, a sapling, a tree. It grows fast, too fast. Within moments, the little olive tree stands tall and calm, its leaves catching the sunlight just so. Someone in the crowd gasps again, this time with genuine awe. Someone else leans in and whispers, "I heard olives can be pressed into oil." Another nods, "You can eat them, cook with them, burn the oil for light." No one mentions what you can do with salty water. Poseidon watches all of this with the expression of a man whose surprise birthday party got upstaged by a well-timed PowerPoint presentation. The town, quite predictably, votes for Athena's gift. And so, Athens is born, not from the sea, not from storms, not from the majesty of saltwater geysers, but from a humble tree and a goddess with a good marketing team. Poseidon does not take it well. Now, you might think he storms off immediately in a huff. But no, he lingers, broods, adjusts his robe like it was always supposed to be this wet. For the next few decades, he causes minor inconveniences all over the region. Crops dry up slightly faster near the coast. Fish get too bony. Oysters turn out oddly spicy. Mortals whisper about the sea god's temper, and Poseidon leans into it. He starts crafting his brand, the powerful but slightly unpredictable deity, the one who could help or hinder, depending on how well you praised him, or how recently you sacrificed something with hooves. Historians still argue whether the salt spring in Athens was real, metaphorical, or just a myth retrofitted to explain why the city never installed decent plumbing. But the story endures. So does Poseidon's grudge. Because this wasn't just about the city. It was about identity, about being seen, about being the second-born son in a family that never let him pick the dinner music. And now he started thinking again, not just about olive trees or civic pride, but about symbols. Poseidon glances back at the place where the salt spring fizzles faintly beside the thriving olive grove. His eye twitches. "I should have brought a horse," he mutters. And that, sleepy wanderer, is where it begins. The horse. Not just any horse. A divine horse. A giant horse. You trail behind Poseidon as the idea swells in his brain like a wave that knows it's going to crash on purpose. Because what is land good for if not to show off something large, hoofed, and totally unnecessary? You follow him back into the sea, where the jellyfish blink nervously and the octopuses hide their art projects. He's already sketching designs in his mind, something tall, proud, impossibly majestic. Something mortals would have to remember. Not like a tree, not like a spring, but a horse. You drift off slightly as he starts listing names. Sea Stomper, Trident Charger, Galapithon. That last one gets rejected by a dolphin focus group. Still, the seed has been planted, and Poseidon, wet, moody, and dangerously creative, is about to get very, very mythic. Poseidon doesn't sleep much these days, not because he doesn't need to, but because sleep feels like something lesser gods do. Instead, he paces along the seabed, his trident occasionally sending sparks into passing kelp forests, eyes burning with a mixture of inspiration and pettiness. The horse has become more than a passing thought. It's an obsession. It's a concept, a revenge statement, a majestic creature meant to stomp through the annals of mythology with salt-slicked hooves and flowing, seaweed-streaked mane. You hover just behind him as he glides through the darkest depths, consulting sea spirits, wrangling currents, and occasionally shouting at a squid for lack of enthusiasm. His palace groans with activity. Sea nymphs are pulling double shifts. Dolphins are ferrying rough sketches back and forth. An eel gets reassigned after suggesting the horse be less scary. You can feel the tension building. Now, the Greeks, like most cultures, had horses already, but none like this. Poseidon's creation will be a first, divine in origin, flawless in form, and large enough to block out the sun if viewed from a dramatic angle. Historians still debate whether Poseidon invented horses wholesale or simply took an existing creature and turned it up to 11. Some fringe theorists even argue that his invention was a divine prank gone too far. But according to the standard myth, the god of the sea built the very first horse from sea foam, wind, and a generous pinch of ego. You watch him work. He begins with the hooves, crafted from hardened coral, smooth but strong, able to shatter cliffs or tap dance politely on marble. The legs stretch impossibly long, sinewed with currents and muscle, wrapping upward like ocean spires. Each joint clicks with tidal precision. Then the body, sleek, broad-chested, covered in a shimmering hide that shifts between storm gray and sea glass green depending on the light. He shapes the back with the curvature of a wave and the power of a riptide. It's as though he's channeling everything he likes about the sea, its grace, its danger, its unpredictability, into one single beast. The mane? Pure chaos. A blend of lightning, foam, and screaming gulls, though he dials back the gulls after a few test runs. It thrashes in the current, never still, never dull. The eyes are worst of all, or best, depending on your taste and nightmares. Deep black orbs, rimmed with whirlpools, watching everything with the infinite judgment of a being born from grudge and brine. At some point, a passing nereid murmurs, "It's beautiful." Poseidon grunts, "It's better than a tree." And that, apparently, is all the praise he needs. You float next to him as the final creature stands tall, pawing at the sea floor, whinnying loud enough to rattle barnacles off passing turtles. It doesn't need to breathe, but it does anyway, just to make a point. This is not a gift. This is a challenge. Poseidon names it Skyphios, a name that means almost nothing to anyone but rolls off the tongue like distant thunder. He rides it once, just once, across the seafloor plains, and the earth above trembles slightly. Somewhere, a mortal drops a basket of olives. Poseidon smiles. But then, of course, comes the issue of what to do with the horse. He can't just park it outside Athena's temple and hope someone notices. That would be too obvious. He needs a bigger stage. A moment. A mortal city in need of divine intervention. Somewhere his horse could prove a point, but subtly, like a hammer made of thunder or a very loud passive-aggressive haiku. And as it happens, the perfect opportunity arrives in the form of a city called Trojan. The city's in trouble, internal squabbles, questionable urban planning, and, more importantly, a total lack of decent mythological landmarks. Poseidon watches from afar, stroking his sea beard. Yes, Trojan would do nicely. He appears in a mortal dream, wearing just enough mist to be mysterious and just enough condescension to be unforgettable. To a local king, he whispers promises of protection, grandeur, and a horse that would put all other horses to shame. The king wakes up drenched, builds a temple to Poseidon out of obligation and fear, and voila, the seed is planted. Soon, stories begin circulating about a divine steed galloping across the coast at dawn. Fishermen speak of hoofprints embedded in stone. A shepherd claims he saw the horse wink at him. None of it is confirmed, but none of it is denied either. And that's exactly the kind of mythology Poseidon wants. Not too neat, not too believable, but just possible enough to earn reverence. Some versions say the horse helped plow the fields of treason in a single night. Others say it carried the soul of a hero to the stars. A very unreliable source claims it opened a bottle of wine with its teeth. All that matters is people start talking, and worshiping, and remembering. And all the while, Poseidon lounges back in his kelp-draped throne, sipping from a conch shell goblet, pretending he's totally over the whole Athens thing. But you, dear listener, know the truth. You can still feel the edge in his grin, the twitch in his trident hand, the subtle way he places miniature statues of his horse in inconvenient spots around Olympus, like on Zeus's cloud lawn or near Athena's olive press. Because this wasn't just about treason, or Athens, or even divine recognition. It was about proving that he could. Poseidon didn't build a horse because it was needed. He built it because he could, and because no one, not even a goddess with an excellent tree, should get to outshine the sea forever. You are now trailing behind Poseidon, who is in a notably smug mood, humming something that sounds like whale song mixed with thunderclaps. His divine horse gallops in wide arcs across the sea floor, kicking up sediment and unsettling a nearby octopus colony. The god is already imagining how to make this an even bigger deal. Because here's the thing, the treason stunt was only the beginning. Poseidon, for all his stormy tantrums and salt-encrusted robes, is starting to understand something that mortals figured out long ago: branding matters. And nothing says unstoppable ocean power quite like a signature animal. Zeus has the eagle, Athena has the owl, Artemis has a full forest of charming woodland pets. But Poseidon? Now, Poseidon has the horse. He's going to milk this. So you follow him to Thessaly, where the plains roll long and wide, and mortal kings still try to name mountains after themselves. Here, Poseidon unleashes a second horse, this one sleeker, leaner, with hooves that sound like thunder and a mane that ripples with bioluminescence. He doesn't give this one a name. Doesn't need to. Its appearance is enough. Farmers stare slack-jawed as it sprints across the fields. Children try to pet it and are gently nudged away by invisible currents. One bard composes a song about its nostrils, which is weird, but Poseidon allows it. Soon, other cities want one. Not just any horse, his horse. They offer sacrifices, build new shrines. One guy tries to paint a mural with crushed oyster shells and faint regret. It's ugly, but Poseidon smiles anyway. This is when the true explosion begins. Word spreads across Greece that Poseidon is the father of horses, the creator, the original stable hand of the cosmos. Never mind that centaurs already exist, and Pegasus has been around for ages. Poseidon starts getting credit for everything even remotely horse-shaped. Fringe mythologists still debate whether this was a deliberate PR move or just divine momentum gone wild. Some say he retroactively claimed horses. Others argue that horses were always sea-born and mortals just didn't realize it yet. There's even one cult in Boeotia that insists horses are just dolphins with legs. You don't join that one. It gets weird fast. But for most Greeks, it becomes accepted truth. The god of the sea is also the god of horses. Let that sink in for a moment. The man who controls earthquakes, tsunamis, sea monsters, and endless watery depth also moonlights as the deity of galloping, saddle sores, and oats. Why? Because he wanted to. You drift beside Poseidon as he tours his new stables. Mystical grottos carved into cliff faces, filled with divine mares that glow in the dark and snort bubbles. He starts naming them. Euryalus, Thalassia, Wave Dancer, Steve. He was tired that day. He experiments. Some have 6 legs. Some shimmer with moonlight. One can teleport, but only to taverns. A mistake, probably, and mortals love it. Soon, chariot racing becomes a kind of ritual. Entire festivals are held in Poseidon's honor, with horses paraded through streets and blessed with saltwater sprinkles. In Corinth, a statue of Poseidon riding a rearing horse is erected that's so huge it blocks the sunrise for 3 consecutive villages. No one complains. And Poseidon, he glows. Sure, Athena still has her city, her tree, her bird. But Poseidon, he's got thunderhoof followers galloping in his name across every field, valley, and coastal plain in Greece. Children learn to shout his name when they fall off their pony. Bards sing of his seaborne steeds. Even the centaurs start sending him polite seasonal offerings, just in case. But underneath all the celebration, you catch a flicker of something else. Poseidon watches quietly from his throne of coral and whalebone, sipping kelp tea, his gaze distant. His horses thunder across Greece, but he's thinking about something else. Athens, still not his, still covered in olives. And so, one night, he hatches a new idea. If the horse won't win him a city, maybe it can conquer one. You see, mortals are starting to war again. As they do, and there's talk of a siege. A long one, a pointless one, a noisy, drawn-out contest over pride, revenge, and the deeply human tendency to let one argument spiral into a decade of murder. The city of Troy. Poseidon raises an eyebrow. He starts thinking, what if a horse wasn't just a gift, but a weapon? The concept twists in his mind like a whirlpool. A horse so big it couldn't be ignored. So mysterious it had to be brought inside the city. So obviously suspicious that its success would be hilarious. The Greeks, desperate for ideas, would take anything at this point. And Poseidon? Poseidon could plant one more symbol. One final insult. A horse not for loyalty, but for deception. Historians still argue whether Poseidon had anything to do with the Trojan horse at all. Officially, it was Odysseus's plan, with some help from Athena. But some suspect the sea god whispered it into someone's ear. Maybe in a dream. Maybe over a wave. Maybe just loud enough for a desperate mortal to catch and call his own. You watch as Poseidon leans forward, amused now, whispering into the breeze as it circles across the Aegean. Let's see how they like this one. And somewhere, a Greek carpenter stares into the horizon and starts sketching. The carpenters work under torchlight. You float among them unseen, the salty wind brushing against your cheek as tools clink and ropes creak. The air smells like sweat, pine resin, and the faint, briny edge of divine mischief. Somewhere in the shadows, Odysseus grins. He's claiming credit already. But you know better. You've seen the whisper slide off Poseidon's tongue like a ripple in the tide. This horse is different from the others. Not alive, not divine, but no less theatrical. 30 cubits tall, wide enough to house 50 men. Its legs are solid timber, straight and proud like temple columns. The body is hollow, clever, dangerous, stupid. A box of heroes painted as a gift, a riddle wrapped in wood. You wonder briefly if Poseidon misses his living horses, those watery, snorting beasts of kelp and coral. But no, he watches this one with a different kind of pride. This one will not gallop. It will wait. It will deceive. It will ruin. The Trojans, of course, have been at war for 10 years. They're tired, hungry, bored. You hover near the walls of Troy as scouts shout about a horse left on the shore. Their voices crack with confusion. It's huge. Why would they leave it? Is it an offering? Some say burn it. Some say leave it. A few say, maybe it's cursed. But then comes Sinon, that smooth-tongued liar, with a tragic face and a perfectly rehearsed story about sacrifice, remorse, and Athena's wrath. He's convincing, too convincing. Poseidon chuckles softly somewhere under the sea. The Trojans, bless their poor decision-making, drag it in. And here's the irony Poseidon enjoys the most. It's all so obvious. A massive wooden horse, abandoned in plain sight, clearly suspicious. But curiosity wins. Pride wins. The kind of pride Poseidon understands deeply. The same pride that led him to build a stormbringer with hooves in the first place. The streets of Troy echo with the cheers of celebration. Harps play. Dancers swirl. Children climb the horse's legs. Somewhere, an old man strokes his beard and mutters that it smells like pine. No one listens. Night falls. Inside the horse, 50 men wait. It's cramped. Hot. One hero sneezes, but no one hears. They whisper their swords to readiness. Above them, stars will silently. Below them, Poseidon watches the waves. And when the gates of Troy finally open again from the inside, mind you, the sea roars in approval. The city burns. You drift above as chaos unfolds, smoke rising, bells clanging, the gods silent, or nearly silent. Because while Athena guides the warriors' blades and Ares dances in the firelight, Poseidon is focused only on the horse. It stands amid the wreckage, untouched by flame. A monument to manipulation. A sculpted insult. A final, glorious prank from a god with an ocean-sized chip on his shoulder. Historians still debate whether the horse was actually Poseidon's idea or whether he simply endorsed it later. Ancient plays hint that he approved of it. Some vase paintings even show him standing next to the horse, pointing at it like a proud uncle. But none of it's conclusive, which, of course, makes the myth better. Because part of Poseidon's power lies in uncertainty. You never quite know if he did something, or if the sea just happened that way. But one thing is certain, after Troy, the horse is legend. Artists paint it on shields. Bards sing about its silence. Future warriors name their steeds after it, hoping for the same hidden strength. Even temples start incorporating equine motifs into Poseidon's iconography, waves and tridents and now, hoofs. And Poseidon? He says nothing. He simply reclines beneath the surface of the wine-dark sea, arms folded behind his head, the corners of his beard twitching upward. Somewhere, a dolphin tries to recreate the horse from driftwood. It fails. He doesn't mind. The gods, meanwhile, whisper amongst themselves. Apollo rolls his eyes. Hera raises an eyebrow. Zeus, as usual, pretends he was part of the idea all along. Athena doesn't speak, but Poseidon knows she knows. He's not just the loser of a city contest anymore. Now, he's the father of something unforgettable. You drift beside him as he runs a finger along a tide. He's sketching new shapes into the ocean. Horses, maybe, or something else. He doesn't say. Because even now, after war and fire, Poseidon isn't finished. He's thinking bigger. If a wooden horse could destroy a city, what could a divine herd do? You shiver slightly at the thought, even as your eyelids grow heavier. The saltwater lullaby around you begins to thicken. Poseidon stares into the deep like someone reading the future from shadows. He's not angry anymore. He's amused. And ambition, in a god, is far more dangerous than fury. So sleep lightly, if you can. Because this horse, this beautifully unnecessary horse, was only step one. And Poseidon's next point? It might just gallop into the sky. You drift, half asleep now, but Poseidon is not done with you yet. The waves part like curtains as you descend beside him into a palace built of shipwrecks and silence. Here, in the halls of coral and whale song, Poseidon is planning again, though planning may be too strong a word. Gods don't draft blueprints. They stir ideas, like spoons in storm clouds. He's lying sideways on a throne of mother of pearl, listening to some poor Nereid try to explain that 3 of his hippocamps have gotten loose again. But Poseidon just waves a hand. Let them run. They're part of the point now. Because since the fall of Troy, his image has evolved. Once, he was mostly a god of salt and smash, earthquakes, tempests, drowning sailors clutching broken masts. Now he's seen as a god of movement, of travel, of unstoppable forward motion. And that, of course, brings us back, yet again, to the horse. The Trojan stunt did something myth can rarely do. It blended violence and artistry. The wooden horse wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol, a metaphor, a walking contradiction, empty and full, passive and lethal. Poseidon loved that. So he begins, experimenting. You're still trailing behind him, your steps muffled by dream sand and seabed silt, as Poseidon starts fusing ideas. Why stop at horses? Why stop at land? What if he could reshape sea creatures in the image of hoofs? You soon meet the first of these strange designs, hippocamps. Half horse, half fish, they're majestic in a slightly confused way. Scaled flanks, webbed hooves, nostrils that blow bubbles instead of steam. They leap between wave crests like dolphins trying out for a jousting tournament. Fringe historians argue whether Poseidon invented hippocamps before or after the Trojan horse incident. Some say they predate even him. Others insist they're a divine answer to a very specific question no one asked. But regardless of when they appeared, Poseidon is now obsessed with them. He trains them, races them, even paints one gold and sends it to Apollo for his birthday just to see if the sun god will get annoyed. He does, but he keeps it. Hippocamps start popping up in port city murals and mosaics, pulling sea chariots, tossing sea foam from their tails, and always leaping toward the horizon. You pause to watch one particularly ambitious artist in Delos embed a whole hippocamp scene into a bathhouse floor, one tile at a time. Poseidon watches too, arms folded, pleased. This is working. Mortals now associate him with power, speed, and beauty. He's not just a sea god. He's a concept, a presence that implies momentum. You mount a horse now, and maybe you think of Poseidon. You feel the wind, and maybe you think of hoofs. You hear thunder, and it sounds a lot like waves, or is it galloping? The lines begin to blur. And Poseidon? He thrives in blurred lines. He starts sending dreams to sculptors. Suggests, softly, that maybe horse statues by the harbor wouldn't be such a bad idea. Maybe temples could carve hooves along their steps. Maybe a hymn or two could mention speed and ocean together, just for fun. It works. Oh, it works. One temple in Aegina installs a marble fountain shaped like a horse's head spitting water. Another in Naxos holds an annual race to honor Poseidon, where the winner gets their name painted on a conch shell. Even landlocked cities start invoking his name before horse races, just in case. Poseidon has never been so in style. And still, he experiments. Next, he tries a breed of wave riders, horses made entirely of water, visible only in moonlight, racing the shoreline with eerie silence. They're beautiful and utterly uncatchable. Mortals report glimpses of them, mistaking them for ghosts or omens. One poet swears he rode one during a particularly strong storm, though that may have been the fever talking. Historians still debate the legitimacy of those sightings, but no one denies the cultural impact. Poseidon has successfully merged beast and wave. You sit beside him on a kelp-covered ledge now, watching mortals race real horses across the beaches of Euboea, trying to time the finish with the tides. Some of them whisper prayers to Poseidon as they go. Others tie little seashells to their horses' manes, thinking it'll bring speed. It won't. But Poseidon loves the effort. You can't help but feel the scale of what he's done. Not just stunts and statues, but mythological synthesis. A once disparate set of symbols, earthquakes, salt, steeds, now melted together into one overwhelming persona. You turn toward him, wondering if this is where it ends. It isn't, because Poseidon has been watching something else lately, something strange and new. Chariots. Not the ceremonial ones pulled by 4 horses and parade loops, but the newer kind. Were chariots. Streamlined. Brutal. Designed for control and shock and fast, terrifying entry into a fight. Poseidon leans forward. What if that was his next canvas? What if the vehicle, not the animal, became the next phase of motion? What if Poseidon could become god not just of horses, but of all things that move? Poseidon taps a barnacle with his toe. The chariot glides into view, not through water, but memory. You're no longer on the sea floor, but drifting along a dusty plain outside Corinth, where two men are preparing for a race that might be more religious than athletic. Sweat glistens on their arms. Bronze wheels glint in the afternoon sun. The crowd is restless, and behind them, uninvited but very present, looms Poseidon's growing influence. Chariots were originally a war tool, blades on the hubs, javelins in hand. But over time, mortals got clever or bored and began racing them. Of course they did. Why merely conquer a neighbor when you could humiliate him on a track in front of 10,000 screaming fans? You stand near the starting line. The charioteers shout to their horses, hands tight on the reins, who's pawing dry earth. The smell is pure adrenaline and dust, with just a whisper of olive oil and hubris. Poseidon loves it. There's something beautifully dumb about mortal sports, like gods playing dice with thunderstorms. You feel it as the race begins, the explosion of motion, the grind of wooden wheels, the scream of the wind tearing past. And at the center of it all, horses. Chariots don't move without them. And horses, according to popular rumor, don't move without Poseidon. Somewhere in the stands, an old woman kisses her coral necklace and murmurs a prayer to him before the final lap. Her grandson is in the lead. Barely. He wins. The crowd roars. Poseidon doesn't care who won. But the devotion? That's his prize. Back beneath the sea, Poseidon begins tweaking his designs again. If mortals are now racing machines, wheeled ones, shouldn't he be the god of those, too? What's the limit of his dominion? Some theologians argued that Poseidon was also god of earthquakes not because of land, but because of movement beneath it. Others pointed to seaquakes, blaming him for tsunamis and tremors. But now, a few brave thinkers whisper that he might also rule over momentum itself, over progress, over kinetic energy, even if they don't have a name for it yet. You watch him stretch this new myth like a harp string. He starts claiming control over any vehicle with momentum. A merchant's ox cart teeters into a ditch near Delphi, and the driver curses Poseidon. A sailor's will breaks during a river crossing, and he tosses a coin overboard to appease the sea god, even though he's 20 miles inland. Poseidon accepts it all. He's everywhere now. Temple offerings expand in scope. No longer just seashells and wine poured into the waves. Now, mortals leave behind wheels. Tiny carved wheels, miniature chariots, even one full-sized axle, left at a shrine in Thera with a note asking for better traction next time, please. Poseidon is amused. He even begins appearing in dreams to cartwrights and racers, offering cryptic advice or laughing maniacally as their wheels fly off mid-turn. One dream recorder in Knossos insists that Poseidon appeared holding a sea chariot with 8 wheels, drawn by hippocamps and breathing mist. Whether this was divine vision or bad fish is unclear, but the image sticks. Poseidon is evolving again, and not everyone's thrilled. Apollo claims it's cheating. Next he'll be god of shoes and sandals. He mutters while adjusting his laurel crown. Athena argues it's a dilution of focus. First the sea, then horses, now wagons. What's next? Poseidon, clouds with rains. He doesn't respond. He's too busy inspecting a new shrine in Thebes where someone has engraved a seahorse next to a wheel and a prayer for safe travels. The myth is growing. Organically. Messily. Like all the best stories do. And here's the thing you notice as you float between ports and city-states, listening to dockworkers and artisans and bored noblemen who all mention Poseidon when wheels squeak or horses shy or ships lurch. They're not even sure why. It's just part of their breath now. Poseidon is motion. He is the ocean, yes, but he is also the journey itself. Whether you sail, gallop, or rattle forward in a squeaky chariot, you offer him a whispered thanks or a mumbled curse. He'll take either. You find yourself at the foot of a modest statue in Argos. It's not grand. No trident. No waves. Just a horse with wheels for legs and seaweed for a mane. A strange, hybrid creature, part beast, part machine, all myth. Someone carved beneath it. Poseidon, who moves us all. Historians still debate whether this statue marked a shift in his worship or was just an artist being weird. Some say it was satire. Others call it prophecy. Either way, it's the clearest symbol yet that Poseidon's point, the one he began with that giant wooden horse, is sticking. You step back, blinking under the moonlight. Poseidon has gone from a sulking contest loser to a mythological innovator. Not through speeches or wars, but by building one very large, very silly horse and refusing to stop. And you're beginning to understand. The horse wasn't just revenge. It was a declaration. Motion is divinity. And Poseidon, for better or worse, is now driving the mythological cart forward, spokes rattling, hippocamps snorting, and the gods holding on for dear, symbolic life. You rub your eyes, trying to remember when you last blinked. Time feels fluid here, like Poseidon's influence itself. 1 minute you're on dry land, the next you're knee-deep in myths so tangled, even the fates would need a spreadsheet. And now, Poseidon's gaze shifts again. He's looking at cities. Not just the walls or the temples, but the way they're laid out. The way people move through them. The bustle of carts, the clip-clop of hooves, the sound of sandals slapping cobblestone in perfect, chaotic rhythms. Movement. Always movement. It's not enough to be the god of oceans and horses and now, apparently, transportation in general. Poseidon starts whispering into the minds of city planners, map makers, and dreamers with blue chalk-stained hands. You find yourself in Athens. Not the marble-draped Athens of postcard memory, but a gritty, early Athens still shaping its bones. There's a debate happening in the agora about whether to widen certain streets. A donkey got stuck between two vendors the day before. Tempers flared. A fig cart was upended. The word Poseidon was shouted no fewer than 5 times, 2 in prayer, 3 in curses. That's enough for Poseidon to take an interest. He appears in a dream that night to the lead architect, not grand or glowing, but disguised as a traveler with dusty feet and good posture. He points at a crooked alley and mutters, "Straighten that out. Horses hate tight corners." The architect wakes with a start, immediately draws up new plans, and tells no one. Not because he doubts the dream, but because explaining why you redesigned an entire district because of Poseidon's alleged horse-whispering tends to ruin your career. The new layout sticks. And oddly enough, traffic flows better. The idea spreads. Other cities begin to borrow ideas. Wide boulevards, long ceremonial streets, avenues built just wide enough for 2 chariots to pass. And where there's chariot space, there's racing. And where there's racing, there's Poseidon. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's growing urban influence was part of any formal cult practice or just coincidence wrapped in superstition. But the results are hard to ignore. You visit Corinth next, where a shrine to Poseidon doubles as a staging point for wagon convoys. Drivers splash a bit of wine on their axles before departing. One merchant offers the god a small, carved horse, half-burned, half-painted, and mutters, "Keep my wheels dry." Yeah, Poseidon hears it all. He's evolving again. Now he's not just in the chariots. He's in the roads. One wandering poet begins calling him Poseidon the Paver. It catches on in some circles, much to Hermes' chagrin. "I thought I was the traveler," Hermes says, slamming his staff into the floor of Olympus. "Yes," Hera replies without looking up, "but you didn't build the racetrack out of spite, did you?" Poseidon grins. His petty origin is his fuel. The Trojan horse, a prank born from bitterness, has now reshaped not just warfare, but urban development, and the cities ripple with his presence. You trail behind him one evening through Thebes, where the glow of oil lamps flickers on cobblestones. A child races a toy cart down a ramp. A dog barks. A wheel breaks. The child shrugs, picks it up, and whispers a little apology to the sea. It's working. You even hear whispers of Poseidon being invoked at roadside shrines, those simple little altars usually dedicated to Hermes or local spirits. Now they include a seashell or a tiny carved hoof. Some even add tiny wooden wheels stacked like offerings of movement. Of course, there's backlash. Artemis is livid when a forest trail is cleared to make a shortcut for a supply line. Dionysus rolls his eyes so hard they almost clatter to the floor. Oh great, now the sea guy wants to control infrastructure. Even Demeter raises an eyebrow when farmers begin requesting blessings from Poseidon for smoother cart pulls rather than from her. But Poseidon doesn't fight them. He doesn't need to. Mortals are doing the work for him. A hero builds a bridge and names it after him. A guild of wheelwrights carves a seahorse into their logo. Even a coin in Aegina features a horse's profile beside a trident, and whether it's official currency or just a weird minting accident, no one can quite agree. You float through all of it, watching Poseidon slink through the cracks of mortal systems, not kicking down doors but sliding through alleyways of logic, convenience, and superstition. He's not commanding loyalty. He's letting it gallop toward him. You pass a mural being painted on the back wall of a bathhouse, Poseidon, standing not on waves, but on a road made of polished sea glass, surrounded by horses, wheels, and porters hauling cargo. It's confusing, beautiful, and strangely hypnotic. You hear someone nearby murmur, "We should build him a statue by the port." And another reply, "Which port?" "Everyone." Poseidon hums, pleased. Because now it's not just about movement anymore. It's about connection. Every road leads somewhere. Every port sends ships. Every hoofbeat echoes down paths mortals built not knowing he would one day claim them. The world is becoming a network of his influence. And you, blinking in the faint glow of torchlight, half dreaming, half historian, are beginning to see that Poseidon didn't just win an old contest against Athena. He changed the game entirely. You're walking now, not through myth or dream or sea foam, but through an actual city. One of those sprawling, sun-baked labyrinths that mortals insist on calling organized, even when they're clearly not. The kind of city where every road leads to 5 other places and none of them are where you meant to go. It smells like olive oil, roasting meat, sweat, and the faintest trace of donkey. But it moves. Carts rattle. People shout. Hooves clack. Somewhere nearby, a wheel squeals like a banshee and then abruptly falls off. The driver shouts a name, not a mechanic's, not a carpenter's. He shouts, "Poseidon, that's where you come in." Because now Poseidon isn't just lurking in waves or peeking into temples. Now he's got influence. You follow the sin of sea salt and civic planning to a little workshop in Rhodes. Inside, a craftsman is carving an intricate wooden relief, a massive horse, wheels for legs, a trident for a tail. The detail is stunning. It's intended for the newly built temple of Poseidon, the connector. Not of the sea, not of horses. The connector. Because Poseidon, evidently, now links things. Not just ports, not just roads, but people, cities, cultures, trade routes, gossip chains, marriages, wars. This temple is an experiment, a theological startup, and it's getting traction. The priestess here is a thin, soft-spoken woman named Clemene who says things like, "Poseidon knows the paths we take before we do." She serves tea. She also leads prayer circles where people ask Poseidon for clarity about crossroads in life, literal and metaphorical. It sounds strange at first, but then again, so did giant wooden horses. Historians still argue whether this temple marked a true evolution in Poseidon's cult or was just a regional fad. Some say it was part of a broader shift in spiritual consciousness. Others blame rising horse cart accidents and a really bad flood. Still, it's effective. Offerings increase. Pilgrims arrive. Merchants donate wagons. Sailors light lanterns at road shrines before going inland. And all of them whisper some version of the same sleepy, salt-heavy thought. "Help me get where I need to go." Poseidon listens. He even starts showing up in travel dreams, no longer yelling or laughing like before. Now he just stands quietly on the edge of the road, pointing left or right. Sometimes he gives directions in the form of horse-shaped clouds. Other times, he hands the dreamer a shell and disappears. You suspect he's enjoying the mystery. You wander through another village. This one isn't coastal, not even close. It's tucked deep in the hills of Arcadia, so far from the ocean you almost forget it exists. But they still have a little shrine to Poseidon. It's just a painted rock, really. Blue swirls, a hoofprint carved into one side. Fresh flowers placed there by a shepherd boy who says his herd listens better when he prays there first. Poseidon's reach has extended well past where logic says it should. His temples no longer need salt air or crashing waves. He's moved inland. Some mythologists believe this expansion was deliberate, that Poseidon wanted land worship the same way Hades wanted temples above ground. Others believe it was mortals who pushed the shift, who needed a patron for roads, horses, movement, and uncertainty, and happened to already know Poseidon's name. Either way, it's happening. Even city-states at odds with one another now share one thing: Poseidon's symbols on their road markers. A tiny trident here, a carved horse head there. A cheeky little inscription, safe travels, by wave or wheel. And what does Poseidon do with all this? He builds again, not with stone, but with stories. You find an old man near Mycenae telling a tale to children about a magical cart that could travel over water, pulled by dolphins and blessed by Poseidon. You hear a singer in Delos describe how Poseidon created the first inland spring by stomping his hoof on a mountaintop. You pass a mural in Delphi showing Poseidon riding a seahorse chariot into a city, not away from it. These aren't just stories anymore. They're infrastructure, the foundation of belief. And Poseidon, old, bitter, briny Poseidon, is now a god of directions, a deity of movement with purpose. It's a far cry from the grudge-filled god who built a wooden horse to get back at the Trojans and show up Athena. But if you squint, the line is still visible. This all started with a gesture, a prank, a flex, a monument that didn't move until it did. You end up in a library. Yes, they exist in these myths, full of scrolls, soot, and scholars with ink-stained fingers. One of them notices your wandering gaze and says, "Did you know Poseidon was once considered god of inland passageways?" You blink. The scholar nods, unrolling a cracked scroll. This one here argues that Poseidon created the very concept of routes. That before him, people just wandered. He gave us direction. You stare at the text. It's smudged, possibly wine-stained, definitely not peer-reviewed. But the idea, it sticks. Poseidon, the one who gave us direction. Not a compass, not a map, but motion with meaning. And suddenly, the horse makes sense again. Not just because it was dramatic, or clever, or dangerous, but because it went somewhere. Poseidon wasn't just proving a point to Athena. He was announcing his relevance to the world beyond the waves. And now he's everywhere, on every path, in every rattle of wheels, every hesitant footstep down an unknown road. You're standing at a fork in a dirt road. One path leads through olive groves shimmering under the sleepy hum of cicadas. The other curves toward a distant hillside town, smoke rising from hearths like whispers into the dusk. Behind you, the sound of hooves, always hooves, echoes faintly, even when no rider appears. And in the middle of the fork, someone has placed a stone. It's not a marker or milestone exactly. It's just a fist-sized lump, painted white, with a roughly carved trident on one side and a tiny hoofprint on the other. You stare at it. Then you look around. No temple in sight. No shrine. No altar. Just this little rock. But it tells you exactly what you need to know. Poseidon has been here. He's not the roaring god of earthquakes in this place. He's not throwing tantrums or tsunamis. He's the quiet hand on your shoulder when you're lost, the breeze that nudges your cart forward, the coincidence that feels too perfect to be random. And he likes it this way. Poseidon has transitioned from spectacle to whisper, and you begin to notice this pattern everywhere. In the myths still told at bathhouses and kitchens and grain stalls, Poseidon isn't always the star anymore. Sometimes he's just there, a background figure with a knowing glance. He doesn't have to strike the ground with a trident to be heard. He only has to build. In Delos, a newly carved relief shows Poseidon guiding a traveler, not with a blazing sea or thunderclouds, but by gently adjusting the wheel of a wagon. You hear a priest describe him not as Lord of Oceans, but as guardian of crossings. Historians still debate whether this reflects a true evolution in his worship or just a regional reinterpretation. Some think Poseidon's temples grew tired of being washed away and started focusing on places with less erosion. Others say it was Poseidon himself, slowly stretching inland, rebranding from tempestuous god to the god of in-betweens. You wander into a theater one night. A play is being performed, a comedy, of course, about a very confused hero who tries to build a shrine to every god along a journey. He ends up broke, exhausted, and with a donkey who worships Poseidon because the roads were smoother than usual. The audience laughs, but when the actor playing Poseidon appears, draped not in seaweed but in dusty travel robes, there's a hush, a recognition, a sense that maybe this isn't entirely a joke, because gods change. They molt like cicadas, adapt like rivers. And Poseidon has learned something most gods don't, that power isn't just in earthquakes or tidal waves. It's in persistence, in presence, in the idea that someone or something is watching over your every crossing. You sit at a tavern that night. There's a weary couple at the next table, discussing their journey home. One says, "Let's rest here a bit. The road's still long." The other nods and murmurs, "We'll move when he nudges us." No name mentioned, just he. You watch the firelight flicker against the stone walls. Above the hearth is a horseshoe nailed into the wood, Poseidon's symbol in disguise. Not flashy, not official, just a gesture, a whisper. You lean back, and for the first time, it becomes clear. Poseidon didn't just build a horse. He built a mythological infrastructure, one where every movement, every journey, every moment of hesitation on the road is touched by him, not by accident, but by evolution. You stroll through an agora the next day, and there it is again. A vendor of cartwheels shouts, blessings from Poseidon on every axle. A child drags a carved wooden horse behind her on a string. A sculptor sells tiny tridents meant to be nailed to front doors, not to ward off sea spirits, but to ensure good travels. It's gotten casual, which, ironically, means it's gotten deeper. Gods fade when they become too dramatic, too isolated from mortal life. But Poseidon has infiltrated the ordinary, the mundane, the boring, and that's where the real staying power is. He doesn't need oracles anymore. He's in the ruts on the road, in the clatter of wagons, in the nervous breath before a journey begins. He's even in your own footsteps now, because whether you admit it or not, you've begun to expect him out here in this dusty, myth-laced world. You feel him when you take a turn and find a way easier than expected. You mutter to him when your pack doesn't fall off your mule. You thank him silently when the road stays dry. The world has grown soft to his presence. And yet, his story still isn't finished. The giant horse may be ancient news, but its impact echoes louder than ever. Cities are still reshaped by it. Roads are still aligned by its legacy. Worship has shifted. And Poseidon, spiteful, salty Poseidon, continues to enjoy the irony. What began as a petty prank has evolved into a divine system of movement itself. And you, dreamy-eyed listener lying in bed now, are walking that same road. You're part of it. You're drifting, softly, down a path Poseidon carved, not with stone, but with the enduring hum of myth, carried quietly by every hoofbeat and turning wheel. You step into the dim light of a small cave tucked into the side of a crumbling hillside. It's quiet here, only the slow drip of mineral water and the scurry of a lizard across stone. You don't even mean to stop, but your feet bring you in, as if some subtle force, familiar now, gives you the slightest nudge at the base of your spine. There's no sign, no temple columns, just a hollow in the earth, and on one wall, someone has etched the shape of a horse with a wave curling from its flank. This is a whisper shrine, not sanctioned, not official, not marked on any sacred map, but it belongs to Poseidon. Here, people come to leave private thoughts, wishes for safe arrival, pleas for decisions to feel less heavy. One wax tablet has a scratch note, north or east, please give a sign. Another simply reads, don't let the wheel break this time. And somewhere, deep within the shifting currents of the world, land or sea, Poseidon might just smile. He's not just the god of oceans anymore. He's become the patron of uncertainty, of that strange tension between one step and the next. And of course, he's still dramatic when he wants to be. Don't get too comfortable. There are still thunderous cracks, rogue waves, cart-toppling gusts of wind. But those are no longer his main language. Now, he speaks in delays, in detours, in the long pause before the fork in the road. And if you listen, really listen, you might hear the faint creak of a cart behind you, where no one walks, or a whinny in the wind, or the subtle crunch of hooves and dust, just before you make your choice. Historians still debate how far this inland version of Poseidon spread. Some believe it was a regional offshoot that never fully integrated into mainstream Hellenic worship. Others argue that traces of it exist all the way into Roman road prayers and even medieval pilgrimage traditions. Either way, the archaeological traces are sparse. Shrines like the one you're standing in weren't built for grandeur. They were built for reminders. And honestly, that's more effective for the modern-day sleeper than any marble colossus. You continue on. The land is changing again, less rugged, more open. The air is warmer. You pass a solitary plowman who hums a song about a talking fish and a runaway cart. It ends with Poseidon appearing from a well, scolding both. The fish apologizes. The cart becomes a boat. The farmer, clearly amused by your confusion, shrugs and says, "Old tale." They say he watches from wells now. From wells? Poseidon, the saltwater god, now has a foothold in freshwater. How convenient. Or maybe how inevitable. After all, control over water was never just about the sea. There are stories now of Poseidon calming springs, ensuring that water flows during droughts. Not because he's suddenly turned charitable, but because, as one priest says, the journey must be possible, not comfortable. Just possible. That feels very Poseidon. You remember how this all started. A horse, built too well, sent rolling, not galloping, dragging fates behind it like plows through the dirt. And you realize, the thing Poseidon really built wasn't just a wooden contraption. It was momentum. And now he's worshipped for that. In towns where sea air has never blown, people still light candles before a journey, still mutter his name under their breath, still dream of roads that stretch ahead, curling like waves of dust and wind, still leave small carved tokens, horses, waves, wheels, at crossroads or in the crooks of old trees. You stop at a market stand selling amulets. One catches your eye, a thin coin-sized piece of clay, glazed blue, with a faint horse head on one side and a spiral on the other. The seller says, protection for travelers, especially over land. He's gotten broader in recent years. You ask who's he? She grins. The one with the temper. The one who listens. Poseidon. You buy it. It's too strange not to. And as you walk on, coin in your pocket, dust on your feet, you notice how Poseidon has slipped into everything. He's become part of the world's nervous system. Not its ruler. Not its loudest god. Just a steady pulse beneath its every step. It's subtle, yes, but permanence often is. And yet, even now, he still plays games. You stop to drink from a stream. The water tastes just slightly briny, though it flows far from the sea. Coincidence? Possibly. But a frog nearby lets out a low, absurd croak that sounds, uncannily, like a horse's whinny. You laugh. Even now, Poseidon can't resist the joke. And that's the thing about him. He never quite leaves. He lingers in the wind that changes your plans, in the puddle that forces you to take a different route, in the creaky bridge that somehow holds just long enough. He built a horse once, just to make a point, and centuries later, you're still riding it. Not on four legs, or wheels, or waves, but on choices, on detours, on that quiet, uneasy feeling of not knowing what's next, but stepping forward anyway, because the journey won't take itself. And somewhere, out there, maybe in the sea, maybe in a well, maybe in the whisper between hoofbeats, Poseidon watches and waits. You wake to soft light spilling through the leaves. There's no temple in sight, no altar, no priest chanting hymns to storm or sea, just dew-damp grass, the faint scent of olive bark warming in the sun, and the low creak of something wooden, something old, somewhere nearby. You sit up slowly. There, at the edge of the grove, is a cart. But not just any cart. It's massive, absurdly so, covered in moss, half sunk into the ground, its wheels long still. Carved into its sides are flaking scenes of galloping horses and swirling waves. No horses pull it now. No driver sits at the reins. It simply is, like a forgotten monument to a joke no one quite remembers. Except you do. You remember the giant horse Poseidon once built. You've been walking in its shadow for what feels like forever now. And here, you find its quiet cousin, this cart that never moved far, but never needed to. Someone left a bundle of herbs in its hollowed-out center. An offering? A picnic? You're not sure. But you know this much. It's sacred now. Maybe not officially. Maybe not to everyone. But something about it settles in your chest like warm sand. Like still water. It's the physical remains of Poseidon's pettiest era. A time when he made his point not with reason or force, but with an impossibly grand sculpture of passive aggression. And yet, people still come here. You find tiny votive offerings tucked into the wheel spokes, broken trinkets, little wooden animals, knotted cords, and even a few with painted waves. A clay tablet reads, "Thanks for not breaking the axle this time." A child's scribble nearby just says, "I like horses." You smile, because what started as divine sarcasm has turned into something gentler. Poseidon, always dramatic, always volatile, seems to have matured, at least a little. Historians still argue about when the shift truly began. Was it after the Trojan War, when worshippers began seeking more stability than spectacle? Was it a slow cultural rebranding as seafaring faded in importance and travel by land took precedence? Or was it simply that the gods themselves, like people, grow bored of their old tricks? You lie back on the grass beside the cart. Above you, clouds drift lazily by, shaped like nothing in particular, unless you really squint and convince yourself one looks like a galloping stallion. That feels appropriate. Your mind drifts. You imagine Poseidon watching all this. Maybe not from Olympus. Maybe not from the sea. Maybe from somewhere in between. Maybe from that cave you passed, or that spring that burbled with salt. Maybe he's leaning against this very cart, invisible and smirking, watching people try to guess what the horse ever meant in the first place. And the best part? It didn't mean anything at first. It was a jab, a dig at Athena, a way to say I could win if I wanted to, a tool for drama. But that's the thing about myths. They don't stay put. They stretch. They grow. They get repurposed, like the horse itself, once a symbol of Poseidon's pride, now an emblem of journeys and missteps and everything in between. You think about all the times you've tripped, rerouted, missed turns, or walked into a situation completely unprepared, only to find, somehow, it worked out. Maybe not the way you planned, but the way it needed to. You glance at the old card again. Poseidon would be pleased with how often his name gets whispered during those moments. Please, just let the wheel stay on. Poseidon, not now. Thanks for not flooding the pass. And sometimes, just, please let me get there. He's become shorthand for frustration and hope. That's quite a trick. You reach out and touch the wheel rim cool and rough beneath your fingers. It doesn't move anymore. Doesn't need to. It's done its job. It's reminded you that motion is more than speed. That being stubborn has its own strange legacy. That sometimes the best way to say something is with a gigantic, impossible, wooden sculpture no one asked for. Poseidon doesn't need you to worship him with temples. He just wants your attention. And boy, did he get it. But now it's different. You stand up slowly, brushing dust from your hands. A breeze nudges through the trees. Far off, a hawk circles. And somewhere, very faintly, you hear the clop of distant hoofs. Or maybe that's just your heartbeat. It's hard to tell anymore. As you walk away, you glance back once more. The cart doesn't shine. It doesn't shimmer. It's just wood, moss, dust. But it stays with you. Because Poseidon's most lasting monument isn't a horse or a cart or even a wave. It's a question. A why? Why did he build it? Why do we still care? Why does it still show up in dreams and road songs and roadside shrines? You don't know, but you do know this. He built it to make a point. And somewhere along the way, that point stopped being about Athena or Athens or even the sea. It became about you. About every road you walk. Every dumb mistake that somehow leads somewhere beautiful. Every twist of fate that pushes you towards something you didn't plan but needed. And maybe, just maybe, Poseidon knew that all along. You walk now along a winding path of uneven stones, the air turning cooler, the ground sloping downward as though nudging you gently towards something you haven't yet seen. Not far ahead, there's a soft glow, firelight flickering behind the cracks of a wooden door. The structure is strange. Not temple, not house. It leans, half buried in the hillside, half forgotten by time. A smithy? A roadside shelter? You push the door open and step inside. It's dim, smoky, and warm. On a bench near the hearth, an old man snoozes, arms folded, head tilted back. His beard is streaked with ash, and on the table before him lies a carved piece of driftwood, half horse, half fish, unfinished. You're not sure why, but you sit. No one speaks. The silence is comfortable, like we're wrapped around your thoughts. On the walls hang strange tools, bronze chisels, coils of rope, little pendants shaped like waves, tridents, and oddly, wheels. Dozens of them. Some carved, some real. One of them spins lazily with every breeze from the open cracks in the walls. This place is a shrine of sorts. Or maybe a workshop. But the kind of place where Poseidon doesn't roar, he humps. He doesn't throw tantrums here. He tinkers. You begin to understand. The god who once smashed his trident into rocks to make salt springs and summon storms with a snarl has become, in his older years, something different. Still a force of nature, yes. Still dangerous when he wants to be. But also methodical. Patient. Persistent. You watch the spinning wheel and think about the myths. The ones you know, the ones you've heard murmured along your journey. There's the famous stuff, of course, Troy and bulls and earthquakes. But lately, you've been noticing the quieter ones. The tale of a fisherman who lost his way and whispered a prayer to the sea, only to find himself gently washed into the right harbor, thanks to a current that shouldn't have been there. Or the woman who walked into a storm, teeth gritted, and emerged on the other side of the flood with her cart upright and every fruit still in place. Or the story of a boy who built a toy horse from sea-bleached wood and told everyone it made him feel safe at night. Those aren't stories of conquest or spectacle. there's stories of continuance. Poseidon's new domain. Historians still argue if these soft Poseidon tales even belong to the same deity. Some call it syncretism, blending foreign minor gods into his cult. Others argue that these were local hero myths, retrofitted with a divine name for legitimacy. And then there's a theory, quiet, not widely accepted, that Poseidon himself evolved. Like the sea, deep currents change course, even if surface waves look the same. You glance at the old man again. His chest rises and falls slowly. One hand twitches, perhaps dreaming of chisels or waves or stubborn, overbuilt wooden animals. And you begin to see, maybe Poseidon didn't just build a horse. Maybe the horse was the beginning of a long, slow arc of self-awareness. After all, what is a god but a reflection of how people need to imagine certainty in chaos? Once, people needed him to rage. Now, they need him to wait, to bear witness to the travel, the almost mistakes, the delays that shape lives. He's become the guardian of the detour. You shift slightly, and a floorboard creaks under your foot. The wheel on the wall spins again, faster this time. You look at it, and then, as softly as a lullaby, a story drifts into your mind. It's of Poseidon watching the horse roll down the hill that first time. You see him standing at the edge of the grove, arms crossed, watching it bump and sway. It's not perfect. One wheel wobbles. A leg breaks off. A child laughs. And Poseidon doesn't fume. He nods, as if to say, yes, let it go. He doesn't chase it. Doesn't try to stop it, just lets the thing become what it needs to. And that's what happens with myths too. They break, they roll, they pick up dust, they lose their shine. And somehow, that makes them better, more human, more useful for nights like this, when the light is low, and you need a story that doesn't demand belief, just patience. You lean back, watching the firelight flicker against the walls. That wooden half-horse on the table? It's smiling, not in a creepy way, just a slight curve in the carved lip, as if even it knows that this whole journey, yours, Poseidon's, the horse's, was never about arrival. It was about motion. You close your eyes. You hear the faint sound of a forge's bellows, the whisper of water running beneath the floorboards, the creak of a cart in the distance, the slow, contented sigh of someone who's finally gotten a good night's sleep. You don't dream of the sea. You dream of wheels. Turning. Always turning. When you wake, the old man is gone. The fire's out, but the warmth lingers, like the memory of a good conversation you can't quite recall. You stand, stretch, and step back outside into a silver morning haze. Everything smells like damp earth and pine resin, and the air is filled with that soft, woolly kind of quiet that follows a heavy rain, though you don't remember any storm. Ahead, a narrow path winds downward between smooth boulders streaked with salt. You follow. Your boots crunch over gravel, your breath visible in little puffs, and for a while the only sound is the rhythm of your steps. Until, faintly, you hear it. Waves. Real ones. Not symbolic. Not metaphorical, honest to the gods, actual sea surf, rolling and sighing against the shore. You smile. It's been a long time coming. The path opens suddenly, and there it is, the coast. Gray-blue waves curled like sleeping cats, foam licking at jagged rocks, and out on the horizon, an island shaped, rather inconveniently, like a horse. Of course, Poseidon wouldn't let you finish this trip without one final nudge. The island isn't large, but you can just make out a few ruins near the center. Broken columns, a toppled arch, and in the middle of it all, a carved stone in the unmistakable shape of a horse's tail. You sit on a rock and watch the tide pull in. There's a battered little fishing boat moored nearby. Someone has painted Triton Express on its side in crooked letters. A faded offering wreath hangs from the bow, now just seaweed and dry reeds. You imagine the fisherman who owns it muttering under his breath every morning, "No waves today, Uncle Poseidon, just a quiet one, please." And some days, the sea listens. That's the Poseidon you've come to know on this journey. Not the rage monster from epic poems, not the flirty menace from old vase paintings, but the quiet, briny uncle who pretends to be grumpy but always makes sure your boat doesn't tip too much when you drop your phone. That's why people still pray to him. Not because they expect miracles, but because they hope someone out there understands how exhausting it is to just keep going. Poseidon, lord of detours. Poseidon, patron of people who are almost late but still somehow make it. Historians still argue whether this softer Poseidon was a post-classical invention. Some say it was a product of Roman reinterpretation, Neptune, all polished and imperial. Others blame late Hellenistic drift, when deities became more psychological, more symbolic. But there's also evidence that rural communities in coastal Greece worshipped Poseidon not just as a sea god, but as a kind of divine roadside helper, a wayfarer's guardian. Not flashy, but present. You think about the old cardigan, about the people who left it offerings, about the joke that became sacred, about the petty contest that accidentally birthed cities. Poseidon never needed to win. He just needed to leave a mark. And oh, what a mark it was. You feel it in the wind whipping your coat, in the salt crust on your lips, in the worn stones beneath your feet, and in the stories, of course. The ones that refuse to go away. The ones told not in grand temples, but in roadside taverns, in whispered prayers before ferry rides, in jokes about that time your cousin took the long route and somehow ended up happier for it. You know how this goes now. You've lived it. One long, meandering walk through a myth that was supposed to be simple. One god, one horse, one moment of pride. But it's never that clean, because Poseidon's myth is also your myth. The myth of stubbornness, of insisting on your own kind of logic, of doing something big, strange, slightly ridiculous, just to prove a point, even if no one's watching. And maybe, just maybe, that's sacred too. You get up and walk to the edge of the water. The waves nip at your boots, then retreat. You look back at the land behind you. How far you've come. How many turns you've taken, steps retraced, distractions followed, snacks eaten, naps taken beside sacred carts. And now here you are. The god of the sea doesn't greet you with thunder. He sends a seagull instead. It lands nearby, stares at you, then squawks and waddles off as if to say, "All right, that's enough reflection, move along." You laugh, and in that laugh, Poseidon's there. Not in thunder or glory. In mischief, you glance out at the sea again, one last time. It doesn't need your prayers, just your attention. You leave the shore behind slowly, not because you're unsure, but because endings always ask for a pause. The kind where you look back once or twice, not expecting anything to change, but just needing to see it again. You've walked a long road, in circles and zigzags, and somehow it all led here, to this quiet beach with a faded fishing boat and a stone horse's tail waving from an island that probably doesn't exist on any real map. The air smells of salt and old stories. Your steps crunch back along the gravel path, and though you're retracing ground, nothing feels the same. Because now you know. You know about Poseidon's petty feud with Athena, about the whole Trident versus olive tree drama that set off centuries of civic pride and architectural rivalry. You've met the side of him that tried to outdo a clever goddess by building a horse, because apparently that was the logical answer at the time. And somehow it was. The logic of myths is rarely tidy. You've seen that over and over on this journey. Gods don't do PowerPoint presentations. They storm into rooms, slap together a scheme, and wait for humans to build temples in the aftermath. Poseidon was no different. He was proud, jealous, unpredictable, and yet oddly endearing. Like someone you wouldn't trust to water your plants, but who'd absolutely help you move apartments at 2 a.m. without asking questions. But even more than that, Poseidon is old, older than Olympus, older than reason, some would say. And as he aged, if gods can age, he seems to have mellowed. He no longer demands waves of worshippers, no longer tosses bulls onto the beach to get your attention. Now he builds, slowly, silently, a horse here, a current there, a wheel that keeps turning even when no one's watching. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's association with horses came before his sea god status or after. Some say he was originally an earth deity. Others trace his origins to Indo-European sky gods and stormbringers. A few even whisper that he began as a chthonic power, lord of underground springs and buried rivers. But maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe Poseidon was always a god of motion. Waves, hooves, wheels, change, not always graceful, sometimes ridiculous, but undeniably forward. That's what the horse was. Not a symbol of pride or defiance. A symbol of motion, of insisting on going somewhere, even if the destination was unclear and the terrain was rocky. Like your journey. Remember the orchard? Remember the cart? Remember the shrine carved into cliffside stone, where the wheel was both sacred and very clearly unsafe. Those places weren't just stops on a mythic road trip. They were the point. Because in Poseidon's world, meaning is rarely handed to you like a polished trident. It's cobbled together from missteps, odd detours, and broken wheels. You trip, you fall, you mutter a half-hearted curse at the gods, and later, you realize the fall was the beginning of the best part. So here you are, somewhere between land and sea, past and future, myth and drowsy memory. The sun is high now, but you feel like lying down. There's a patch of soft grass nearby, and the sound of waves folding onto sand is more lullaby than warning. You stretch out, close your eyes, and finally, let go. The road grows softer now, like a line of warm moss curling around your thoughts. The noise fades gently, the rush of waves turning to hush, the trundle of wheels slowing, the rattle of myth drifting off into the distance like a forgotten echo. You're still there, of course, still lying back on that soft patch of grass near the sea, where Poseidon once proved a point with a horse made of wood and pride. But the world is dimming slightly, as if a gentle hand is turning down the brightness, not to hide anything, but to help you rest. Your limbs are heavy, comfortably so, the kind of heaviness that means you've done enough. You've wandered far enough, fought long enough. Let the gods bicker and squabble and shape cities without needing you to pick a side. The waves whisper now, not in language, but in rhythm, back and forth, in and out, like breath, your breath. Even the horse is quiet now. Its great, ridiculous shape a silhouette in your memory. You can still hear the clunk of its wooden legs, but fainter, like a lullaby remembered from childhood. And somewhere, Poseidon himself exhales, a long, low sigh that ripples across the sea and into your bones. You are still, you are safe, and the story has ended, not with a bang, but with a whisper. Sleep now, the sea will wait.